Hi, and welcome to Women of Worth Wednesday. I am I am being told to there we go. I am Ganel-Lyn, and I am here with my friend Kathy Jenkins. We are a little delayed because we've moved places now twice and someone just walked in. So who knows? We are at the beautiful office of Covenant and Siegel, and we thought it would be very easy to just find a little corner, but it hasn't been. We are dear friends, and so I always feel grateful when I get to interview someone that I already love so much, like I feel about Kathy. But it's also a little challenging because I could go on, and you guys don't want a 2-hour interview. I mean,
No, I don't want one either.
So welcome to Women of Worth and High Five Live. Please comment in the comments where you're watching from. We're so grateful for this Easter week, this Holy Week. And this morning as I was getting ready, what I thought we were going to talk about when we scheduled this felt like it needed to be adjusted. And I am grateful for the Spirit guiding and directing. And it usually means it's always going to turn out better than I had planned. And it also means, especially on this show, that someone has been praying. And so we're always willing to change plans for God. The original conversation I wanted to have is around adoption and Kathy's journey with that, and we'll probably touch on that at the end. Poor Kathy can't see herself right now because the comments are covering, but
that's good. I'm feeling less intimidated.
But I also have gotten to know Kathy's story with losing 2 of her children. She shares her story with that journey in this book that we worked on together called The Decision That Changed My Life. And I decided that this morning someone has been praying, and maybe it's because I've been notified about a number of suicide deaths the last few days. But the loss of a child, especially around this time of year, I think brings to mind an appreciation and awareness of the gift of our Savior and his sacrifice. So Kathy, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about you as the fabulous writer and author editor that you are, but beyond that, you're also a grandma and a mama. How many children do you have?
My ex-husband and I adopted 5 children, and one of them has given me 4 grandchildren, which are the absolute lights of my life.
They're amazing.
Precious little souls ever created, I am convinced. And what Ganel-Lyn's referring to is I had 2 sons die within 15 months of each other. My 17-year-old son committed suicide, and 15 months later, his 20-year-old brother died of an accidental drug overdose. And I have had unbelievable experiences that have led me to know that they are safe, they are happy, they are prospering in the spirit world. And I have an absolute, undeniable testimony that the resurrection is real. And that what the Savior went through, culminating this week, of course, in our observation of Easter, means that every single person who ever lived on the face of this earth will be resurrected, will have a reuniting of the body and the spirit, without which we cannot experience a full measure of joy. And he has given that to us as his gift.
One of the things that I love about Kathy that you can feel, if you catch the time frame of that, she's adopted all of these children and loses 2 within 15 months. It's extraordinary. And for those of you that know Kathy, know of her exuberance for life, her talent, and her wisdom. But I think the thing that I was drawn to first and foremost as your friend is your strength and your ability to turn to the Lord, to the point that she's one of my go-to faith friends when I'm feeling low and struggling. You reference sacred experiences where you've had that reassurance. What do you feel comfortable sharing as an example of that for maybe those that are out there? I know that I talk to a lot of parents that lose children that want something, some reassurance. And because we can talk about Christ, the atonement, resurrection, faith all day long till the cows come home.
Right.
The minute you lose someone, then the rubber hits the road. Then you're like, I don't know. Do I really, really, really believe this?
Well, I think one that was really special for me We did Daniel's temple work. My son Nicholas did it right before he left on his mission, and so
Which
Daniel.
you share a little bit in this. This is our new book, yes.
Yeah. So Daniel had the Melchizedek priesthood and had been endowed by proxy. And when I put my son Nicholas in the MTC, oh my word, I thought my world had come crashing to an end. The spectrum of emotions went from absolute elation that he would make that choice to serve the Lord to profound grief that he was no longer around me. And the thing that surprised me more than anything was that I felt a physical absence of the Melchizedek priesthood in my home. Because I was divorced at the time.
You were divorced. Yeah. Kathy could write 12,000 books. Divorce, adoption.
Anyway, and I felt so absolutely bereft that the Melchizedek priesthood was gone. And the very next day, I was working at my computer, and I could hear footsteps upstairs. Very clearly hear footsteps. And I was given to know that it was Daniel. And a few months later, we were driving with my daughter and my little granddaughter, who was 4 at the time. And she said, "Granny, I want to go to your house and play with the alien." And I said,
"Who is this grandchild?"
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn.
She's 16 now. I said, "Oh, there's an alien at Granny's house?" She said, "Granny, haven't you seen the alien?" I said, "Gee, I really haven't." And my daughter and I were looking at each other like, oh boy. We got to my daughter's house and something occurred to me. And I said, "Jessica, go get a picture of your brothers. Has Brooklyn seen the pictures?" And she said, "No." I said, "Go get a picture." So she did. And I said, "Brooklyn, come here." And I turned over the picture of Cameron and I said, "Do you know who this is?" And she looked and looked at it. And she said, "No, Granny, I don't know who that is." I started to turn over the picture of Daniel, and before I even got it turned over, she shrieked, "That's the alien! That's the alien at your house." And I said, "Honey, where is he?" And she said, "In Uncle's old bedroom." And my sweet, precious son, knowing that I was so distressed about the Melchizedek priesthood not being in my home, had come. And he was there, and he was staying in my home to make sure that I had the priesthood there. And he stayed until my daughter and son-in-law moved in 3 or 4 months later. Wow. And then he was gone.
Wow.
Yeah, so I know they're there. More than that, I know that they are very involved with us and keenly interested in us and still love us with all of their hearts. And they don't disappear and go into some ether world where they're not aware of us. They are very, very aware of us. Another experience I had, the Mother's Day after Cameron committed suicide, I was in my bathroom alone getting ready and feeling really, really heavy-hearted. And I heard Cameron's voice as clear as a bell say, "Hi, Mom." And so I know that not only are they there, but they are aware of us and they are ministering to us, yes.
I love that. Thank you for sharing 2 really sacred experiences. And I think for our viewers that may have not had those experiences and they haven't received that comfort, they don't know for sure that everything is okay. I think this is why we do bear testimony, right? It's why our scriptures are filled with testimony. It's because we're trying really hard to make sure we're sharing stories of faith here on High Five Live and at Women of Worth and in the books that you and I work on. Because sometimes you don't have it and you have to lean on someone else's experience.
Right, and we are told that that's a spiritual gift.
Yes.
That it's a spiritual gift to believe on the words of others.
To believe.
And I hope, as I share that you will believe and that you will know that in your own life, whether you've had an experience like that or not, that your loved ones who have departed are keenly aware of you.
Very. And I think that I always try to look for, especially when I'm struggling or I'm in grief and I'm not sure, where your mind, your heart are in battle. I look at patterns, and the Lord's pattern is family, and the Lord's pattern is ministering, and the Lord's pattern is to allow us to continue on those relationships. That's what the Restored Gospel teaches. And I love that you not only exhibit your strength, but strongly exhibit your faith in all that you do and continue to go through.
Well, one thing that I know for sure, 2 things actually. The Lord is in charge, and the Lord has a plan. And sometimes that plan doesn't make any sense at all to us. And especially when we're left behind and a loved one is taken.
Which you've done that quite a few times.
Yeah. And the night that Daniel died, our bishop came up and put his arm around me, and he said, I want you to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that Daniel is exactly where he is supposed to be, and this is exactly what the Lord has planned for him. And no, that didn't make sense to me at the time, and still may not make a lot of sense to me, but I'm willing to give the Lord the benefit of the doubt and know that because of his plan, which is more magnificent than any plan I can ever have for myself, that he's orchestrating things and things are working out as they should.
And we share that in common with Meg's suicide. We've talked at length about if you've had that experience. It's a very unique grief, and I think as is overdose. I think those are addictions, a complicated grief as well. You mentioned Nicholas and him serving a mission, and you mention your testimony of not always understanding God's plan, why things don't work out. You share in this new book, I Can Choose Joy with God, which is the third in the With God series, very specifically a situation of struggling and going through the motions to try to adopt. And for our viewers that go through and have dealt with infertility and have tried to adopt, people think they're just babies sitting over at Target and you just go pick them up. It's not that at all. And you share a very tender experience of going through a process where you thought you would adopt a baby, it didn't work out, and then later learning that baby died of SIDS, and how God had almost protected you from a grief that you couldn't have handled at the time. And not that you were hoping for that for another mother, but that the Lord, in saying no, preserved you from something. And I thought that was such a beautiful testimony. Any other final thoughts on Easter and your feelings about the Savior? I love that Women of Worth and High Five Live, we can talk Jesus till the cows come home. I love that this is a place to do that. So any other
And
feeling?
he is everything.
He is everything.
I think my very favorite piece of church art was done by Liz Lemon Swindle, and it shows Peter and John running toward the tomb when they first hear that the Savior has been resurrected and that his body is no longer there. And the looks on their faces that she captured, they're running, and the look is a combination of this can't be true mixed with, oh, please let it be true. And I look at that when I'm feeling sorrow and when I'm feeling challenged. I look at that piece of art and I think of them arriving at that garden tomb, and I have visited the garden tomb. I think of them arriving at that tomb and seeing that he had risen and that everything he had said and everything he had promised was true. And again, I alluded to this at the beginning of this, but he did what he did out of his absolute love for the Father and to execute the Father's plan, and out of his absolute love for us. And every single one of us will be the beneficiaries of that.
I love that. Thank you. And I'll add my testimony that he, in that exact garden, felt every disappointment, every loss, every sense of depression, anxiety, grief, trauma that we have experienced. As I've been studying Come Follow Me this week, to read of the rejection of one of his apostles and then two of his apostles, with Peter denying him, and the complete mockery and ridicule he had to endure, and abuse. I was overcome again with the knowledge that even on my darkest day, it doesn't even compare. And yet he doesn't sit back and say, "What's up with you? Why are you whining at me and struggling?" He comes with his grace and understanding, and he is the one that can always say to me, "I totally understand."
And his role, he knows what it is like to have a son commit suicide.
Yeah.
He knows that. He has felt it firsthand. And his role is to succor us. And if you look up the definition of the word succor, it is to run to. He's not, like you said, standing back and going, "You whiner, what's your problem? Look what I went through."
Yeah.
No, he is waiting to run to us, to offer us aid and comfort and peace.
And I love that idea that he cried out to the Father, "Where art thou?" I was hit again today that when I feel alone and I feel misunderstood and I feel rejection and I feel loss and loneliness, he is the perfect best friend, right? The comforter.
Yes.
And he is the perfect to atone, and he's walked already through that. So when I say to someone, you just don't understand, there is always one that does.
There is always one who does.
There is always one that does. Thank you for joining me, my
Oh,
dear friend.
thanks for
I love
letting
you
me.
so much.
I love you.
She's one of my most favorite people and came into my life at a very crucial time, and God knew exactly what he was doing and who I needed when we became friends. And
as he did for me with her. So it's a mutual admiration society.
Yes, and I hope that this week specifically that this message will be shared with especially families that have gone through or are going through this kind of grief and loss that Kathy has shared and that many have experienced, and maybe struggling with infertility and adoption too, because aren't we so grateful that God arranged your family the way he did, because you have a beautiful eternal family.
I do.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be with you again next week on Women of Worth Wednesday here on High Five Life.